Welcome, everybody, to the Grind Overwatch Path to Pro podcast, episode 8. I have some fantastic guests with me once again today. Unfortunately, Vowels is running late. He's off looking for his continents, but he'll be here as soon as he possibly can. In the meantime, I'm going to do my usual. I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves to you. Before I do that, though, please remember our Discord server is open. !grind. We'll bring that up for you. Come join us. Pop your questions into the question submission for our Q&A at the end of the episode. And with that, let's hop right into it. So I'm going to start with you, Panda. Who are you and why should we care?
Well, I don't know how much you should care, but my name's PkMnPanda. Andy, some like to call me behind the scenes Panda as well. As you see, I'm a very lovely, fluffy creature. But yeah, I cast high-level Overwatch, man. I've done 2 seasons with Broadcast.gg through South America, Chinese Contenders, season 2 and 3 of the 2018 season. Done a lot of Open Division, and Trials is where I started, both for EU. Haven't done NA outside of Open Division so far. But yeah, I've been casting Overwatch for about 2 years, been in the scene since closed beta, been in esports all of my life, just a big fan of video games as a whole.
Well, I mean, clearly you play video games your whole life, but how did you, what was your first foray into the world of esports and in what capacity?
Oh man, that's gonna bring me back. I remember way back, my first tournament, my first intro into esports. I remember going down to the local video game shop. It was a Blockbuster, for those of you who remember Blockbuster. And it was for a Super Smash Bros. Super Smash Bros. 64 tournament, and it was out of 74 placements. I placed top 5. I was so young, but that was easily my first intro. And then I started getting a little bit more in depth with video games. I really like fighting games, but then I found a love for Halo, and then the class-based shooters started to come around soon after that. You had your Call of Duties, and then all the different iterations of Halo, plus Modern Warfare came out, and then Advanced Warfare by Tom Clancy's, and then Overwatch finally came out too. And then something really stuck to me with Overwatch as a whole. I really enjoy the swift rotations that comes through it, the team-based, class-based, FPS-esque style, mix a little bit of MOBA kind of on top of that too, and just overall, not necessarily the control chaos. I guess it kind of is too. That kind of just draws me to it continuously. Just how insane Overwatch is, just at a level that just makes it so fun.
And at what point did you make the transition from player to analyst to coach, caster? I mean, you've done all of it.
I remember this was the first year Overwatch was out. I was still playing on a team. I believe I was only Diamond around the time, and one of my friends asked me. He was like, "Hey, we have we need a caster for what was called the Scrub Cup at the time." And I was like, "Well, I've never tried casting before. I definitely enjoy talking about games. I enjoy the analytical side of it, so I gave it a try." My friend and my first co-caster, Boda, if you're out there and you see this, it was him that gave me the extra oomph to try it, and I never looked back. I gave up playing collegiate esports literally the following week. I then started doing a lot more scrim nights that still go on with Broadcast.gg continuously out through the weeks, and then the director Mushu B finally approached me and was like, "Hey man, you wanna do some open division?" And I was floored. I mean, I took everything and I went into casting rather than like practicing with like with aim training and going in through just continuously learning and trying to up my game into upping my casting instead. I took that aim training and then I started doing vocal training, and then I started doing as much VOD reviews of my cast as possible rather than my games. It was a really weird transition, but it was within the first year of Overwatch.
Nice. And now you are one of the most prominent BGG casters, if I do say so. You've really made a name for yourself, and I think that's really exciting. And of course, you've recently coached you still are coaching an Open Division team against the Grain, and they did pretty well in the last Open Division. How did that go for you guys?
Well, Open Division was a fun experience for Against the Grain as a whole. I think that's the toughest experience that Against the Grain has seen so far, and it was where they got pushed to the limit. Especially, I mean, there were some tough opponents that we had to get through all the way through trials, to get into trials rather. But making it through in a blistering series or in a blistering run, only losing 1 game to Mirage Esports in one of the final weeks, it was probably one of the most it was probably one of the best experiences of my life, just living vicariously through my players, just We were actually joking about it, both both me and ecLipse here before we actually went live, and it was just like, how do you actually feel when you're in the call? You can't actually watch the game. Jklol was in this as well. Like, it's got to be. It was antagonizing because I couldn't see the games, but I could hear them. And living vicariously through the sounds of my players is just, you cannot replace the feel of that, of just how triumphant they sounded and just how good that makes a coach feel.
Well, we can't talk about Open Division playoffs without talking about Novus Ordo Seclorum. And the best person to talk a little bit more about that is ecLipse. So, ecLipse, tell us, who are you and why should we care?
My name is ecLipse. I played flex support for Team Novus and Team Austria at the World Cup. And yeah, I currently play flex support for second gen in NA Contenders. And yeah, I guess that's everything.
So, how did you get into Overwatch?
My brother told me, "Hey, there's this new game coming out," and he just bought it for me and him, and then we just played quick play, and I liked the game, and I decided to play this game more, and it eventually became my main game. So yeah.
Did you play any games professionally before Overwatch, or was this kind of your first attempt at any sort of professional play?
Professionally, no, but I mean, I reached like global in CS, but not like I didn't play in any teams or any tournaments.
And you're still pretty young, so you've got a lot coming up for you, in the future of Overwatch. And I have to ask, how does your age affect things like your play time, your scrim time, especially now in NA? You've got school, you've got everything else going on. How do you balance it?
I mean, when I used to scrim in EU, it wasn't really a problem. My parents were pretty chill about that. But now that I scrim in NA, scrims tend to go to like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and I can't really talk, so that hinders me a lot. So I guess school really screws me over there. Yeah.
How is it with the ping from EU to NA?
I mean, you have to get used to it, but it is definitely playable. It's not. I imagine it to be way worse than what it actually is. So it's playable.
You're not wrong. ZA, we play on 200 ping to EU, so I feel that on a spiritual level. But I'm sure it will come with time. And we're looking forward to seeing you in the next contender season. Really disappointed to see you guys drop out of playoffs. Let's just quickly move on to Jklol, and then we can really dive into the Open Division playoffs. So, Jklol, tell us, who are you and why do we care?
My name is Jklol21. I'm the main tank player for Shoes Money Crew EU in EU Contenders. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
who I am.
You should have said yeah. You should have said yeah. Come on.
Yeah, that is who I am.
And tell us, how did you get into Overwatch?
I was actually a casual console noob before I started found Overwatch. I mean, I was just your average, like, go to school, play FIFA, average UK kid. But then Overwatch came out. My friends, the beta, convinced me to play it on the console first, and I was terrible. I was awful. I was like silver maybe, and and then I managed to get enough money to get a PC, and then after that I bought Overwatch there, and then I just started playing on Overwatch on PC. Like, this is my first ever game I've ever played. Like, even thought about going professional. Like, so, and then I went from like diamond to master to GM, and then went into a team like around a year or 2 years ago, maybe now, and it was just the team of my friend who convinced me to try scrimming. And yeah, from there it just went from tier 5 to 4 to 3 to now tier 2. So
Yeah, I mean, we know you've played on a couple of teams coming up to getting to where you are now. And I think that's pretty exciting. And so you say Overwatch is the first game you ever considered playing professionally. Were there other
yeah,
games that you kind of just played hardcore and didn't think about professional?
I
Any
mean,
sort of game that maybe gave you an edge in Overwatch, even if you did start it still?
well, I mean, I used to play a lot of strategy games, like EU4 and Civ. I mean, that's sort of like, although they're kind of brain dead, they also kind of give you that mental, like for playing a main tank at least, it's all about thinking in game and having that natural game sense. And playing games which require you to think can kind of give you like that natural game sense when you go into a different game.
All right, well, let's move straight on to Open Division playoffs. And I feel like that was like it was a really interesting time. Some of the teams, NA was a lot of fun. EU was basically the Hunger Games. So just how did the road to playoffs look? Let's start there. You start out just in open division. How were you guys feeling during that time? And of course, Panda, you can speak as a coach for ATG, not just as a caster. How did it look for each of you guys? You can just jump in, whoever wants to answer that first.
Well, I mean, I'll go with all planned. Like we felt pretty confident going in because it was the top 16 teams going to playoffs from OD, so we felt pretty confident that we were at least the top 16. But when we got into playoffs, it was just, I don't know. I think for us, for me especially, when we got into playoffs, we had been playing scrimming nonstop for like 6 months, and getting into the final weeks of the weekend of playoffs, it's like you just get so burnt out after like months of just continuous playing. And like I felt like against our game against you, ecLipse, like we were so tired. Like, and me and Slur especially, we did like everything we could have, but we still lost 3-0 to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a really fun time. Like with all planned, it's probably one of the most fun I've had playing this game. Especially, I mean, we were all friends. We were all laughing. And, but every time we played, we just loved playing with each other. But it's unfortunate that we only one team from playoffs made it through to trials. So, or two teams, sorry, not one.
Well, two teams from Trials went into Contenders, but one team out of Open Division playoffs into Trials too. And I think that kind of like sets like the precedent for like the EU Hunger Games that you said, Noris. Because I mean, like it was, you could tell even like all the way towards like the grand final too, which had Novus in there too. Like you could just tell the fatigue was really there too. I don't know too much behind the scenes for the EU, but the same for NA. Again, going back against the grain, got pushed to the limit for the playoffs going into Open Division, trying to make it into Trials. And just like JK was saying, like it was grueling. It was a lot of scrims. We spent a lot of time in Discord just practicing, VOD reviewing, talking, going over strategies, going over enemy strategies, and then doing them all over again. There was a lot of communication between myself as the assistant coach at the time under the head coach SK for Against the Grain. And I was mostly trying to focus on player health at that point too, because like JK was saying, like it's grueling. You can face a little bit of that burnout too, but as long as not necessarily as like a manager kind of type thing, but like you want to be reminded, like wake up on time. You make sure you have a good breakfast, have a banana before you have a scrim, before you actually end up going into a tournament game. Like all these things mean so much. Even for myself as a caster, I've covered like 4 or 5 regions at this point too. I can tell you how important it is to at least get 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. I know they say to at least get 8, but my body is just fine with at least 4 to at least 6. So I as players and coaches and casters alike, as long as you are getting as much sleep as possible per night and not always keeping your eyeballs sweating into your monitor, that's pretty much the goal of it, keeping yourself healthy along the way.
What about for Nos, ecLipse? How were you guys feeling in Open Division leading up to the playoffs?
I mean, we were pretty confident that we're gonna make it to playoffs. It wasn't really like we also didn't get any hard games in the weeks, so it was pretty much easy going until playoffs. In playoffs,
Easy flex.
I mean, yeah, I guess, but in playoffs, then we kind of try harder more. I mean, for me personally, and then in the end, in the grand final, we actually, as you all probably know, we reverse swept, and that was kind of a wake up call, I think, for us, that we are indeed not maybe as good as we think. So
I mean, you guys had a pretty stacked roster. Were there like trials for this? Were you just were you approached individually? How did that roster actually form?
I think it was the big one that just decided, like, after he left Samsung, he decided to make a team for the next Open Division, and he hit up like a certain amount of players, and then we just did trials like I think 2 months before Open Division started.
I actually tried out for them as well.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess this is how the team was created.
Aw, that's so sad. All
Yeah.
right, let's move along before we get really sad with that. So what what kind of challenges did you guys have to face? I mean, I know obviously in trials, for example, all of the games have been casted, so that gives it a little bit of an edge. You can watch the other teams. In open division, it's very much down to teams giving permission, and as we noticed, especially in the EU region, teams did not want to give permission. So
Yeah.
aside from not being able to scout out the enemy, what other challenges did you guys face, moving up through open division this season?
For me, I think the biggest challenge was overcoming the No You OTP comp. That comp was disgustingly dreadful to play against. I can't describe
Understandable.
the feeling I felt in that game. I never wanted to win and I never win a game, but at the same time just leave and never play again during that game. That was awful. I mean,
That comp was dirty, man.
looking at it now, it's like looking back at it, it's not even a good comp. It's really easy to counter, but at the time when you're like in the moment, you just don't know what to do.
Let's be reminded, this is coming from a main tank that had to put up with Brig shield bashing through shields for quite some time, and yet this was the pushover. This was the pushover limit right here.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely our biggest challenge, I think, with all planned. But then also, one other big challenge was half the team's French and half the team's English and Austrian. So it's pretty hard to get that language barrier out. Because I mean, I've been playing with Kagasi for like maybe a year and a half now. I was playing with Kagasi, and before he like started getting good at English, he was terrible to understand. You couldn't understand a word he was saying because of his accent. And it was sort of like that with some of the other players as well when we started playing with all planned. But yeah.
Just learn French, lol.
I mean, I'm terrible at French. I think I got an E in my French exams in school.
Oh,
I
suck
didn't
at
even know
French
you
as
could
well.
get an
Don't
E.
worry.
I didn't know that was actually a letter grade. What? Inventing new frontiers. And what about for Nos? I mean, I know you guys said you had pretty smooth sailings for most of the part. I can't remember. Did you guys play No You OTP?
Yes, we.
How did that go?
Yeah, you guys threw
It was
it.
pretty easy. I don't know.
Wow.
You expect like they stomped other teams, and we were like kind of monk a shake. Like I don't know.
I think that was the main
I
thing.
personally was afraid of playing them, so
They were scary. I think that was what it was.
it was
It's like,
scary. Yeah.
you didn't understand why they were beating like Wind and Rain and stuff like
exactly.
contender teams. You're like, what? How have they beaten them? And it was just
I
like you
remember,
go into the game really scared.
Yeah, I remember like sitting because I was playing at my brother's PC actually because my GPU was dead. So I remember like sitting there. I was like, oh my god, they just 3-0'd like I don't know, it was Feb or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, I'm scared of playing them. I don't want to lose to this team in like playoffs.
For those that don't actually know, the composition that No You OTP ran quite ridiculous. They had like a Reaper, a Mei, Roadhog, a Rissa. I think it was Zen and
It was Lucio and Ano. What they switched
Yeah.
around. They did Ana Zen like on defense maps, but it was mostly
Just
Lucio and Ana.
absolutely crazy. I mean, that sounds like something you'd run into in one of your quick play games, and it was absolutely dominating.
Something you might run into in a EU comp when they 6-stack.
Yeah, I was about to say that's some EU comp like after dark stuff right there. Like in case y'all don't know, too, No You OTP, No You One Trick Profile, which is why they always like played around these compositions too. And from a player side too, I feel for you, JK. I actually feel for that too because it's like the first time watching Chinese Contenders Season 3 2018, Route 66, Quad DPS rolls out. A team that has been very strong just looked at that comp. They were like, what do we do? What is there? What is there to do? I mean, like like if you actually write down on paper like how to counter out that composition, you're just like, oh yeah, easy, that's not a problem. But then you get punched in the face, and you're just like, wait a second,
Yeah.
what?
That just happened.
What is happening? You're attacking with the Rissa.
One of the pros for No UTB was they would never scrim anyone. The only practice they got was 6-stacking in comp. Like, so no one had any experience or practice against them unless you wanted to like 6-stack yourself and snipe them when they're queuing. Then it's the only way you can get a scrim of them.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do it, guys.
Everybody just gather around 2 o'clock in the morning. It's fine. We'll just 6-stack and we'll look for No UOTP.
It doesn't really matter about the SR. This isn't about SR. We're trying to just scrim.
Every
Looking
time you
for
get
scrim
into a
bucks
game,
in competitive. What the heck?
every time you join a game and it's not, just leave. It's fine. You can get that SR back.
It's about scrims. It's about scrim bucks. Gotta get them.
And so you get through the whole of the regular season of Open Division. You finally get into playoffs. What do? How do you prepare for these upcoming games? Pan, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Preparing for the upcoming games, not really knowing for your opponent too. I mean, that's hard. You almost have to look at individuals at that point too, right? I mean, that's no monkey shake to the 2 players that I'm sandwiching between two. But that's exactly how we did it from a story standpoint, analytically, when we were starting to look at these teams originally, because we didn't have any VODs on Novus really going through the entirety of the series. So I had to look at ecLipse as a player, I had to look at Kara as a player, I had to look at every single individual as a player and almost generalize how their play would be surrounded around their support line, which, hey, go figure, they did. It's kind of like the same thing going through all of these teams, really, even through NA as well. Like, you'll see a lot of different names across the board too. I mean, I'll go ahead and already throw young Valsy under the bus too. I mean, if you take a look at what became Square One, you'll notice like Jolf, Hot Date, Dove, Ultraviolet, like those are all players that have been in the competitive scene for NA for quite some time. So like you can go ahead and generalize how these players, not necessarily how they're going to play, but how they would be centered around, right? It's the same thing with in EU, to put it in better perspective for those that are actually awake and watching the podcast. It's kind of like when we got reintroduced to Caffey, both through Open Division Grand Finals and through Trials. Caffey, I said it on broadcast continuously. It's not that he's a 2-trick, but his Zarya reflects heavily off of his years of experience as Tracer, continuously on flanks, always poking in your side, a big old laser beam thorn in the side of a team. It really throws team off their step, right? So you have to put it in perspective. Like, not only are we having to realize that there's a high charge Zarya that could be behind the Reinhardt shield, but then we also have to worry about Tracer flanks. Oh wait, but there's a high charge Zarya there, and he's actually pretty decent at tracking. His name's Coffee. So it gets a little bit interesting like that too, when you don't necessarily know how a whole team's going to play. You have to look at their pop-off potential off of individuals, right? Unless you're just ecLipse and you just know Sombra routes and then you just land sleep darts and take EMPs. But you can't really expect those things, all right? But you can at least expect how the individuals will perform.
For the rest of you guys, how did you prepare for your playoff matches?
I don't know. I think we just scrimmed like normal. So
wow.
Yeah,
easy clap.
Lost out here just flexing on everyone in EU.
It's not a flex. Just I don't know. I feel like we just scrimmed normally and we were confident. So
I mean, we sort of did the same. We just scrimmed normally, but then we also had we just prayed that we didn't get no OTP in playoffs as well. We didn't want to play them again.
I will say that that game was a lot of fun too. I think we casted one No You OTP game, and it was so much fun to cast because you could see the teams did not know what was going on.
I love looking at the ensuing chaos of teams trying to adapt on the fly, really, too. I mean, like, and not to push the comfort button for Novus too. I mean, like, that's kind of like what you guys had to do in the grand finals of Open Division as a whole too, right? I mean, like, adapting on the fly. All those scrim bucks are going to come in handy too when you have to go for a reverse sweep. I mean, you can try to scrim against any GOATS team you possibly want to, but you can't really prepare for a pop off potential like Coffee brought to you guys too. And it's more of a first person, like, tip my hat to you guys because I mean, like, that adaptation, analyzing that match live, like, that was insanity.
I mean, that was pretty good experience for them because when they came up against Yab in Trials, they just rolled them because they knew exactly what to do because of that playoff game. I mean, we found it really hard against Yab when for SMC, even though we all thought that we weren't playing very good that day. I mean, when you go into against Yab, against Cafe without a plan to deal with him, then you're just gonna get rolled if you just underestimate what you can do on Zarya.
Charges grabs so fast. It's like,
I mean,
even if your D.Va eats it, it's just like he's gonna have another one in like 45 seconds. So it's like, the heck? Do we even eat it? Do we just die?
Like you can't do anything against him. He goes like out of position, but you can't really punish him. So I don't know. It's weird playing against him.
It's like more of that Tracer background too. Like, cooldown management from blinks goes into bubbles, like back down to flanks, and then I forget who his breakthrough FAP going into Yab was right off the top of my head, but like, that armor pack ability always being in the pocket for Coffee as he's just like coming back on these wicked flanks is actually insane. I mean, like it's so hard to plan against a very unorthodox play style like Coffee plays Zarya.
Last question on playoffs. Before I get into that, I'm just going to remind everybody, !grind will bring up the Discord. You can come join us and pop your questions for the Q&A at the end of the session. So let's just, I mentioned earlier that EU was basically the Hunger Games with less cameras because no one would let us stream. So in terms of pressure,
Shade.
how do you... how different was the level of pressure to perform well? Obviously Panda can speak for NA and you guys can speak for EU. What kind of pressure were you guys feeling for those games?
Well, I mean, they were the fact that we didn't have like 1,000 or 1,000 plus people watching us during the OD playoffs made it wasn't really as there wasn't much pressure compared to at least compared to trials when you have to think about the 1,000 people watching you and just judging you. But I mean, they were still pretty. I mean, because a lot, at least for us, for all planned, there was a lot of our first time. Well, for me at least, it was the first time I was in playoffs. The first time Slow was in playoffs. We were pretty nervous. There was a lot of pressure. We felt like to perform because we'd never really been here before. So, but I mean, for the rest of our team, they'd like Little Flame and Kagasi, they'd been in playoffs before, so they kind of knew what the deal was. But yeah, for half our team during playoffs, we felt the pressure quite a lot.
I mean for last ecLipse, yeah, you were saying that everything was pretty. And then
I mean, pressure I don't think is a problem for us because we have pretty experienced players like Molfig, Obling, they all play Contenders. I don't think it's more the live stream pressure, like you have to perform for these people. It's just what is at stake. Like if you lose, you're out, and it's like GG for like 6 months. There's nothing to do. So
yeah.
I guess that is more the pressure that you feel. For me, at least in game, it's not about like people watching you, but it's just what at stake.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, very very Hunger Games. Overwatch became a battle royale in OD playoffs.
Yeah.
And obviously in that last game against FAP, the pressure was it had to be on at that point. I mean, you guys were 2 maps down, and you know it's do or die. How did you bring that around?
I mean, do you want me to be completely honest? We had
yes,
yes. when we were 3-1 down, Kara said, "Okay, guys, we have nothing to lose anymore. Just play your game. We might win this." So that's actually how it happened. I don't know.
That sounds like I could actually picture Kara just saying that, like vividly in his voice. I could just hear that. Like that's. I was always saying too, like from the analyst standpoint, I was like, the big one plays the best when his back is against the wall too. Like y'all just tapped into some inner strength and just pushed past Super Saiyan God and was just like, all right, Ultra Instinct time. And like Nubani was absolutely mind-boggling. Just watching you all come back, like reattacking that point continuously. It was just like the fight is always winnable. Apparently, I don't know what they're seeing, but the fight was definitely winnable at that point. It was like, oh cool, the big one just has a 80 charge again, and he's just layering in damage. Wow. Well, this was not seen the past couple maps, and now it is sticking around. Very, very interesting. Yeah. Again, going back to those adaptations too. I mean, nothing to lose. It's kind of the same thing that you kind of ingrain, pun intended to what I told against the grain too, going into and playing on stream too. And I'm sure you two could attest to this as well. Like when you're playing on stream and you're playing on camera, you can't necessarily even think about that, right? You can't have chat open. You can't really thinking about that you're on stream. You have to be playing your game. You have to be focusing on the game, and it's that moment's hesitation that you're just worried about. Like, oh, I just messed up in front of, like, even if it's in front of 20 people, even if you're streaming to your mom next door, like who cares? like you have to perform well, and you have to play your best. You have to show why you made it this far into open division, why you are poised to make it to trials, and why you're trying to show yourself as a top contender. Like you have to play your best. You can't let being on stream affect that. I not continuing the shade of why teams didn't want to be streamed going through playoffs as a whole. But I know that's a whole strategy thing because you want to make sure that you're guaranteed that that Covenant first spot. which definitely makes sense. Again, as a coach's perspective, I totally understand that. Believe me. But it also helps you kind of fight with the fears, if you will, too, because when you're on LAN, and I know that there should be more of those coming around. I know that they should be coming around.
Pray.
Hopefully, yeah, right. pray for LAN GGs, please. But it's when you're playing on stream, even if it's online, going into LAN too, it kind of sets up for those staged nerves and experience in a way, and a certain perspective that you just have to kind of get used to, because you don't really have a say in those LAN matches. You're like, they want to stream them, they're going to be streamed. If it's a tournament, regardless of the fact that they say they're going to be streamed and you don't really have a say in it, like Open Division, it's all of that. Those exposure bucks actually pay dividends at that point.
Yeah. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end of playoffs. I think that was a really spicy ride for all the teams that were involved, and obviously playoffs for EU was not necessarily the end of the road for all the players, because Jklol, we did see you coming into trials in a new team,
Yes.
which was pretty exciting. I was pretty happy to see that. We were really impressed with how you played in playoffs, so I was glad to see that you did manage to get picked up. So once again, let's have that EU versus NA perspective, because once again, NA 5 teams got through to trials, and for EU it was 2. How was that pressure? How did you feel that in your games?
Well, I mean, it essentially meant that every game you had to win. If you lost, I mean, for NA, I think one team got through to contenders with more losses than wins. Like EU, it's just like you have to win every game, and not only do you have to win every game, you have to make sure you win by at least 2 maps in every game. Otherwise, the map differential is gonna come back to bite you. So there was definitely a lot of pressure to make sure you win. But I mean, it's how it was. It's how it is when you're only 2 teams that can get the spots. You just have to make sure you win the games.
Yep.
Damn, I had another question. It's now flown out of my head. GG's.
GR, go next.
Go Goats.
Good round. Yeah, so unfortunately Nos didn't make it into the finals there, and that was something I wanted to ask about, because now you've joined second gen, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in the show. When did that, was there a trial for that? Were you just contacted? When did you know that it's all good, I'm going to NA?
I did my looking for team post on Twitter, and
Mhm.
on the same day, I got hit up by Callion. I think Callion, the coach of second gen. He just asked me if I want to trial for them. I was like, yeah, sure. Then I trialed, and on the same day I got picked because they needed a flex support, and Rustlog was coming around. So yeah.
I suppose they could have picked somebody worse. They managed to yoink one of the best flex GGs. And if,
Blush.
the other thing that I wanted to ask, the other thing I wanted to ask about Panda about contenders was about the roster shuffles. I don't know how
Yes.
badly that affected all of you guys,
The
but
infamous
did you
shuffles.
feel that?
I mean, there was definitely some pros and cons to the shuffles. I mean, one of the pros was that really, really, really unfortunate for August and Hungary. What happened with them?
Yeah.
They definitely got hit the worst by the shuffles.
Yep. Sure.
We lost half our team as well, but luckily we picked up Slur, who's a god on flex support. And we had Gustav and Polly just online to be able to join as well. So it was, I mean, we lost some of the experienced players, but we also brought in like new, really good talent, which are as good as the experienced players, in my opinion. So we ended up pretty good from it. But other teams did not were not good from the shuffle. It was very, very unfortunate for them.
Well, the only team in EU Open Division trials that didn't see a single shakeup was Novus, and I literally remember making that a story point on broadcast. It was just like they have the team synergy down. You know, like that's why their goats is so strong, because that's what goats is half of all about, is team synergy and working well together. It's not necessarily always mechanical skill, which they definitely back, but it's comes down to team synergy. There was literally 7 out of 8 teams, just for perspective and numbers for you all, that saw roster shape ups going into EU trials that it almost made me feel right at home coming off of South American Contenders, because it's just like everybody just keeps going to different teams. We're all just playing with each other now, and it's the same thing for EU. Not so much in SA for languages as it is in EU, because of how many different nations are playing with one another. That kind of shakeup, that trust when you have a different language that's being spoken in your communication, can really throw off in the middle of a game too, which is why you'll see, or why, if you go back and watch the VODs, which is why you see a lot of desynchronized rotations through the first couple days too. But you can even take a team such as Side Effects, Orgless in Hungary, which didn't necessarily do all too great through trials, but still had a good run through towards the end of the weeks for EU trials because of how well they started playing with each other. I mean, it's crazy to think how much scrim time actually plays into effect with you playing with one another, and you got to see that towards the end of the weeks.
Definitely.
And so, what are your thoughts and feelings going into Contenders? Obviously, now it's just around the corner, just a couple weeks away, and I think the team shouldn't be shaking up too much between now and then. So, how confident are you guys feeling? I know, ecLipse, you're going to be playing on a billion ping, and that's going to be fun.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. For me, we've only scrimmed twice now, so I can't really give you a picture of what I think we're gonna finish at. But I think with Contenders being 2 weeks now, because they played it, so we have more time to practice, and I think we can get better a lot. So I haven't been that interested in NA Contenders, so I don't have the info on which teams are that good, or I don't know, because I've been focusing on EU obviously with Team Novus. But yeah, I just hope that we're gonna perform our best, and yeah.
Well, you almost have to look at it like the two splits too, because it's NA. You're on West for second generation, so you're in the lot with soon to be joined Square One analysts in vowels. You'll have Team Envy, NRG, Atlanta Academy is probably the one that you have to be most fearful of, next to XL2 Academy and their roster differences, and then you have Skyfoxes in phase 2. But I can already tell you, working with second generation, that was once first generation, that was once the original GOATs that I casted in Open Division a while ago. Those of you wanted to know that Gator, Atlanta, his Gator, the main tank for Atlanta in Overwatch League, is that was his original team. I can tell you, ecLipse, with the manager Recklats, you're in really good hands. You're in really good hands. They'll definitely take care of you. You focus on your game, man. They'll definitely take care of you. You have a very good split that you're walking into. I definitely see you guys doing well.
Sounds good.
JK, how are you guys feeling with Contenders just around the corner?
Well, I mean, Contenders for us starts in a week. On the 28th, it's our first game. So we don't have as much time as ecLipse in NA. But we're feeling pretty confident. Just as long as Poly doesn't fall off the map during an official in on Volskaya, we should be pretty cool. We feel pretty confident in our play.
But that could become like a thing, you know? Polly jumps off the map, and that's how you know you're gonna win. That could be like your mascot thing. Like when Polly jumps off the map, then you know you're gonna win.
Yeah, definitely. It's a ritual. You need to take a bath, and then we make sure we win.
Win conditions and self-destructs. I like it.
Let's have a look here. Hey, it's Vowels. It's your boy.
Hello.
Hello, Vowels. Did you find your consonants?
I'm not leaving. Bye. Great show.
No,
I just want you to know though, Vals, because it's been a while since you and I have even talked. Like that came from me. That came from me. The bottom of my heart, all the way over here in NA, came from me.
I'm not surprised. Not surprised.
All right, so let's take a quick little gap in where we were to do my usual hello, Vowels. Who are you, and why should we?
My name is Vowels. I am an assistant coach for the NA Contenders team Square One, despite the accent. I'm obviously not American. I kind of made my name working a lot with Broadcast.gg as both a caster and analyst, most notably for Chinese Contenders. And then I decided to give coaching a try, and that's how I ended up where I am now.
Nice. With Path to Poverty, or with Square One, previously known as Path to Poverty, I remember seeing you're looking for Team thing go out on Twitter, and I also remember then another tweet coming through saying you'd had a few teams approach you. So what made you eventually decide to stick with Square One?
I was set on joining an NA team over an EU one if I could, purely because my work schedule in the evenings means that I can get to NA scrims much more reliably than EU ones. And Square One were the best NA team that approached me. It largely came down to that. I had a couple trial sessions with the team, got on well with everyone, just felt right.
And going through Open Division and eventually playoffs, how are you guys feeling? How did that all go for you? So we're like backtracking previous topics just so we can get your perspective.
Playoffs felt, apart from the end, they felt pretty good. For those who weren't familiar with NA Open Division playoffs, we came second in Open Division, losing a very long 4-3 series. And that was fun to try and pick ourselves back up from. But other than that, Open Division playoffs we felt went pretty well overall. Obviously, can't argue a second. Very lucky that in NA that gets you into trials. I know that EU wasn't as fortunate.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Hunger Games.
Feels
And
weird being
actually-
the only NA person on this podcast right now and hearing you say that.
Yeah.
Panda, I believe you and I were actually on broadcast for the NAOD final, and I still wound up. No, I'm thinking of EU.
That was
Ignore me.
you. Yeah, I analyzed, but you bet your butts I was definitely watching that matchup though, because I mean it wasn't just a long grueling matchup that that Square One previously Path to Poverty in Open Division Finals lost to Mirage. It was a long grueling matchup that went the distance against a very composed Mirage Esports too. Because I mean, like if you look back at that team too, like that's the team with Mangachu, it had Carter on there, Shane, Shu, OG. That's a stacked roster too. Not saying that Square One wasn't, because I already before you had joined Vowels, I already mentioned too. Like when you take a look at the team as a whole, like you look at them as individuals and what they've done through the scene. Like look at Ultraviolet, you look at Hot Day, you look at Jolf, all the way to Dove. Like those are well versed players. So what you saw in that long grueling matchup was well composed players versus well composed players going the distance at a very long weekend of games, and that itself, I mean, you definitely highlighted it wonderfully, man. I mean, to pull yourself back up from that's it's insane.
And we beat him in trials, and that's what really matters.
That's emphatic. Emphatic, man.
That is true.
Get your retribution, man.
One of the questions that I did ask was, how was the pressure knowing that you didn't need to win? Obviously, that becomes very different to how the EU players felt. We said that EU was basically Hunger Games. So I can't remember how many went through from playoffs to trials.
The top 6 went to trials, and the top 5 went to contenders. Obviously, that's very different from how it worked in EU. Unfortunately, I can't say that it didn't affect us, and we still wanted to win in the same way that EU players won the line, because we always knew in the back of our heads that sure, we made it. At the same time, there are no free games. We went into every single game we played, both in playoffs and with trials, with the mentality of we want to win this game. We are going to try our hardest to win this game, because we don't take games off. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can't say that we felt the same level of pressure as EU players did, because how the system works, unfortunately, but we didn't give ourselves any free games.
Yeah. That's good though. That's the mentality you should have, especially even knowing the trials, again, 5 teams got to go through, and you guys blazed through trials. I've been really impressed watching your game, seeing your scoreline go up. What kind of changes did you make between playoffs and trials to just skyrocket through? You guys even beat Sky Foxes, who were looking to be possibly the strongest team in trials.
There's an element of randomness in Open Division, even in playoffs, that you don't really have much tape on any of the teams. Maybe you haven't scrimmed them, you aren't familiar with how they play. Going into trials, we knew every team well, and we scouted every team, we game planned against them, and like I said, we didn't take games off. Even going into week 3, when we were 5-0, we'd confirmed our contenders playoffs. We still spent the week scouting and game planning against Sky Fox and Chicken Contenders to take the win, because it was important for us to take the win.
That makes sense.
Open Division and trials for us, having that ability to scout and game plan those opposing teams.
Exactly, yeah, that makes a big difference. And finally, just one last question about your team. What inspired the new name, Square One?
No one on Square One has been at this level before. No one at Square One made trials before, and most of the players hadn't even made playoffs. This is the furthest any of us have come. Obviously, I've had a much shorter journey in the world of coaching than what the head coach Applewood has. But the players have all been here several times and never quite reached it. It felt like a new beginning, finally breaking through to trials and Square One. We spent a lot of time trying to come up with names and logos, and nothing really stuck. Square One was, I think, the first one that everyone was actually happy with, and it just felt right. And we've got a pretty good shade of magenta to go with it too.
Man, that's wholesome. I like that.
Magenta is nice.
It is nice. And how are you guys feeling coming into Contenders in just a couple of weeks? You guys are going to be playing against ecLipse pretty soon. How do you feel about that?
ecLipse was someone I had my eye on. Funnily enough, I'm going to say nice things because he's here, but someone I definitely had my eye on in EU, which is, unfortunately, because of the differences in structure, we are looking a little bit to EU to maybe pick up substitutes if needed, or future players if we lose any of our players. ecLipse was one of the players we did have our eyes on, and Jklol, of course. So
You're just saying that.
Looking forward to.
You're just saying that one.
Now, there are certainly players that we've looked at and felt a bit, but neither of you two. And it's going to be interesting playing against ecLipse on second gen. I'm glad that I'm not going to be the only one in Contenders destroying my sleep schedule for it. Enough waffling. We're feeling pretty good. Obviously, it's a whole different world in Contenders. We're going against a million academy teams who get paid full time to play this game, and we still all have real life commitments with school. Me and Apple both work part of full time as well. There's only so much time we commit to the team, and sure, that puts us a little bit of a disadvantage, but we're just going to do our best, and that should be enough.
We hope. All right, as we move on to the next topic, just a reminder quickly, exclamation mind, we'll bring you the Discord, hop in, give us your questions, submissions. You can also put them into the Twitch chat if you like. We would really like to have you in the Discord though, so that we can ping you incessantly. So please come join us, send us your questions. We will have a Q&A at the end of the show. We are now going to move on to the shifting meta, and I'm really glad, Vals, that you got here in time for this, because you and Panda, I really appreciate your big brain analysis when it comes to metas. So we've been seeing so many interesting things coming out recently. We've been seeing some quad DPS, we've been seeing some goats, we've been seeing a lot of goats. Now we've got a nerf coming in. I think it's just gone live, where Brigitte armor no longer stacks under shields. So from all of you guys, obviously, how do you think that's going to potentially affect how the meta is played?
It's going to make Sombra stronger. Sombra's suddenly in a really good place because of the previous armor changes they made as well. At least that's my take on why Sombra's suddenly come back to prominence. Because Zenyatta, unfortunately, is a free kill again once that armor's gone. You can't rely on an infinite armor forever. And now with the armor being on top of the shields and being able to chip away at it as well, it's even more vulnerable. That's my take on why Sombra's come back, and I feel like these changes are just going to make Sombra comps even stronger, which bodes well for Skyfoxes at least. But we'll see.
I think definitely DPS are going to be obviously way more stronger now. Also, it's kind of weird, like, since I've been switching scenes. In the EU scene, there's like rarely DPS played, which I like it that way. So coming into NA, it's really, really tough scrimming all those newcomers, especially when you just realize that they really dislike Ghosts, they don't want to play it. When you're used to Ghosts for like the last 4 months, so it's a big change for me personally. Yeah.
I think you've just irritated every flex DPS that's been stuck in Brig Jail for 6 months.
Yeah, Brig Jail is absolutely horrendous, but for me as Sen, it's okay to play Ghosts. So yeah.
You go from tank driven to DPS driven. It's like a tale of two different regions.
Yeah, I just dislike playing DPS in officials, to be honest. I just suck at it in officials.
I feel this.
Feel that. And how else do you... No, go ahead, Panda.
Well, I was about to say, I'm like, just to piggyback off of Vowels too, I mean, like, I think this is... and for Eclipse, I think this is all about just Zenyatta too. I mean, like, if you take a look at Goats, and you take a look at some of their biggest damage dealers and some of the biggest threats that comes from goats, like when you're focusing down targets, it's typically Rein or Zen, right? Like Zarya, after the bubbles are gone, then you focus on the Zarya, who's high charge, and you got to get that elimination anyway. So with the Graviton Surge doesn't come back around. Sorry if I'm speaking too fast. But you have to realize what Zen brings to the table. 35% extra damage with Discord. That's a lot of damage going over to your Reinhardt, ladies and gentlemen. And with the armor nerfs too, like, yeah, you want to make sure the Zenyatta's dealt with. And I think that's especially where Sombra comes back in handy. I mean, the whole idea for NA as a whole, you're right, ecLipse, is to kill goats as a whole. Not, we're talking metaphorically here, guys. We're not actually talking about going out back and killing goats here. Take it easy. What we're actually talking about here is as much as we can make tanks defenseless and useless. And we look back at that, and what was the biggest pain in our butts in our East Coast special matches here in NA was Hammond. And when you take tank-centric driven compositions like that around Hamster or around even goats itself, one of the biggest answers that we had was Sombra. You make them so useless that they're defenseless, and then they're just easy ult charge. At that point that they never even get any, just to put it in perspective, take Junkertown, for example. If you snowball on attacks so heavily with the Sombra, they literally won't even get a single defense to use any ult combinations whatsoever, because 1, if not 3, will always be hacked. You'll always have a backline pressure with Sombra too if they're smart and using their translocator prominently and proactively. Then at that point, you have to kind of pick and choose your fights, hide around the corners. And when you're corralling more like sheep rather than goats, you don't really get a chance to play aggressive like goats should. And then you don't gain ult charge. You don't get Inspire from Brig, making the entire comp useless.
What do you guys think a potential counter to this new Sombra strong meta might be? No leaks, of course. Don't give us any secret strats.
Goats.
I just think goats as well, to be honest.
Yeah. If you play goats, like, you can't
Play
beat it.
goats, please.
No,
As the only one here who still scrims in EU, I can tell you that the new changes, it hasn't affected goats too much. I mean, people think goats is just with Zen. There's 2 different types of goats as well you can run. The Moira goats especially would be pretty good against any sort of Sombra spam comp. Maybe even Ana goats as well, which hasn't really been played that much, but it's still pretty strong.
I feel like there's a very clear difference between bad goats and good goats. I feel like when Sombra changes, it's going to be harder for bad goats to disguise as good goats. Sombra beats bad goats, but good goats beat Sombra is how the new meta is going to work out.
Yeah, because bad goats gets snuffed out because bad goats gets backed up by mechanical skill, which is where like, no shade to all the teams in the Overwatch League, but that's where they're getting heavily backed by their mechanical skill. I mean, that's part of the reason why they made it to the Overwatch League is because they're mechanically gifted, right? But they're not macroly gifted at playing goats, much like my EU friends here. What you have to look at is how do you actually deal with an entire composition while everybody's just like, oh, well, Sombra counters goats. Well, no, Vowels is right. I would still stand by the only thing that technically directly counters goats is probably goats, but it's how you play it. It's how you go forward and where you follow the Discord orbs and making sure that your Zenyatta stays alive, not continuously hacked and thrown in the side, or you could just pick up ecLipse and sleep dart the Sombra. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, like, it's easy. I mean, right? Like, just hit the sleep dart forehead, yeah.
Big forehead.
Yeah,
JK, what are you feeling as a... Oh, sorry. Let me let...
That's okay, too.
No. Speak.
I just said I think that as well, that good goats will still beat Sombra goats. Or Sombra in general.
All right, JK, as a tank main, how are you feeling with this new changes? Potentially, because obviously goats is now becoming a little bit more map dependent or point dependent. So how are you feeling as a main tank with all of these potential changes?
Well, I mean, my position on Ryan has never really changed. I dislike playing him, and I've always have. In goats, he's really annoying to play. He's really because it's sort of you just have to you're just holding shield. You constantly have to think. I don't like playing him. But like with the new changes, floats is sort of more playable, especially on different maps with high grounds, which is my favorite comp by far. Getting to play monkey and harassing people's backlines like we did against Nos, just being annoying and being really taking all the aggro to you. It's like my favorite way to play, and I think with the DPS comps, Floats is pretty good against it, but also Goats is still pretty good against it if you play it really well. So as a main tank, these changes it's not much of a difference to me, except from I get to play Winston on a few more maps, which is always a plus.
I'm actually done with these players in my freaking broadcast. ecLipse loves goats, and JK hates Ryan.
Please play the strongest comp. It's the strongest comp. I don't like it, but if you win with it, I'm fine with it. So
take back what I said too. Zenyatta inside goats is like Reinhardt too. They almost feel like it's like super powered in a way too. Like if the feel is right and the fight goes in that certain manner, yeah, I would like to play goats as Zenyatta too. I mean, you feel unstoppable. Like, how are they gonna get past all three of those tanks? I'm just gonna keep laying orbs of destruction into your face the entire time. You can't get back to me.
Slur and then you get picked across the map. So
calculated.
Yep.
Calculated F. It's fine. Just play Zenyatta as slow. That's how you do that.
Monka, shake.
And then you win.
Actually.
And it makes me so sad to hear that, JK, because, and this is something that Recent actually wanted me to bring up on the show, which was your basically game-winning shatter against OMG. and now you tell me you don't like Ryan.
Well, I mean, like, he's a fundamental like hero for Ghosts, and like I probably have most playing time on him in the game, but it's sort of like he's just not fun to play for me. Like at least for Monkey compared to Monkey, when I'm playing Ryan, it is fun when you win because it's always fun when you win. But I mean, you also you have to think quite a lot, especially in Goats, about what you're doing as Ryan, and you have to sort of. You can't really think of yourself as an individual player. You have to think of yourself as what am I going to do to help my team best. And on Monkey, it's a lot easier to just think, I'm going to do this individual play, which is going to help my team, but I don't have to think too hard about where my team are. Like, do I have to shield them? Do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? So it's a lot more like liberating for me to play Monkey, which is why I enjoy him a lot more than Ryan. But I mean, Ryan, he's fun, but only when you win. And, in ranked games where you go to have fun, you don't win most of the time when you play Ryan. So
you go into rank to have fun?
What? Who does that?
Who are you?
if I'm playing Winston or I'm playing Reaper in rank, then I'm having fun. So
Reaper?
Reaper?
In
2019?
Yeah, you don't have a Reaper one-trick profile in Diamond Clips? Come on, dude.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I may have a Reaper one-trick Smurf, which I have a lot of fun playing.
My main tank, I'm going to call him out, has legitimately tried to convince us to run Reaper main tank composition. Please do not give him any ideas.
Frontline pressure!
He has a good idea. It's a good idea.
Frontline pressure!
Reaper got buffed. He has 2 shotguns. He can kill tanks. Come on, Reaper's cool.
I saw it in Owl, and somebody messaged me, and they were like, yeah, pick against all the tanks, they're going to win! And I was like, pat on head. Okay, that kind of brings us to the end of our segment involving actual topics. So we don't have too much time. We've got about 25 minutes left of the show, and we're going to take some questions from our audience. So once again, guys, !grind will get you the link to our Discord. You can come pop your questions in the question submission channel, or you can just pop them into the Twitch chat, and Chase/SciFight will port those in for me. So let's get started with some of our better questions up here, and the first one is from Recent, and and I think this one was aimed specifically at Jklol.
Yeah.
And the question was, do you think Recent is cute? With a
I mean, I'm gonna have to say yes. I mean, I've seen pictures of him. He's pretty damn cute. Not gonna lie.
Have you seen his snaps with like the filters?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah.
The question is, have you seen snaps of me in a minion onesie? I don't think you have.
I would like to.
I
have seen a picture. Oh, Panda. It's okay. I'll send you Recent. He won't hate me at all for that. Let's move on to a little bit more serious question. Yeah, how did you guys feel about the map pools in Contenders?
The map pools, they're
After
pretty
map
good.
pools in Contenders or Contenders Trials?
Or Trials, rather. Let's
I was going to say, I don't think Contenders map pools have been released.
No, we don't have them yet.
Shh, you know what I meant.
For me, the maps were fine. I'm glad Li Jiang wasn't in, so yeah.
Yes.
Mood.
I absolutely hate
Spoken like a true support man.
The wave of just dread I felt the first time I loaded into Junkertown in a scrim was surely something, but other than that, I felt like it was pretty good overall.
I loved Junkertown. I could play Orisa. He's like Orisa's as like one of my also my favorite heroes.
JK Lowell's like,
recent
hey, give me an
Conversa-
excuse not to play Reinhardt. Let's go. Let's go.
I know Recent actually DM'd me at one point, and he's like, I'm trying really hard to make compositions with Orisa, and it's not working.
You need to embrace the magic of bongoats. It is.
Exactly.
It's goats.
Horse oats.
But, no, bongoats.
Horse
That,
oats.
that's the term.
Boats. That's what it is actually.
No,
Come on,
that's pirate
Aori.
ship.
Okay,
Boats
so,
is pirate ship.
I
A
can't
couple
get
of
into
people have
this.
probably noticed that we run bongoats a lot on Nepal Sanctum in particular.
Yeah,
that
Sanctum
is
pretty good.
that is the one composition our main tank came up with which works, and he uses that as the scapegoat for every other bad composition he comes up with.
You're gonna-
It isn't going to work.
You're gonna trust Jolf to make an Orisa composition, but you're not gonna trust him on Reinhardt or on Reaper? Come on, bro. I was like, this is logic here.
Have you seen Jobs Orisa? It's clean.
You know, it is. I actually,
Maybe not quite up there with JK Lol, but second best.
yeah. And I
Why
think
is
just
it
to
always the
piggyback.
main tanks? The main tanks always come up with these ridiculous comps, like always.
I think you spend
You
too
do-
much time just sat there with your shield up. Too much thinking time.
Yeah, y'all just spent too much time on Reinhardt. Y'all just waiting to break free. We keep on talking about like DPS and like Brig Jail or like Tank Jail and stuff. Just like, what about main tanks? They've been stuck in
Exactly.
Reinhardt like asylum for quite some time now. And I think just to piggyback off this entire conversation, I think that's what this map pool did greatly for Trials as a whole, is that it didn't necessarily force goats, which is why you saw a lot of versatility. I mean, even take Busan for example too. Like you load into downtown, you see goats right off break, you'd probably be loading into a game when Busan first came out because everybody and their mom was trying to come out with this pharmacy, Ash, or Widowmaker composition surrounded by like a single tank hamster. But then they scouted that out and they went back to the spawn room and immediately switched goats anyway. But you look at the entirety of the map pool as a whole, there's surely some maps where goats is strongest on, but I think as a whole, like it wasn't necessarily forced on all these maps too. And I'm with ecLipse too. I'm glad I didn't see Lijiang Tower.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely on Volskaya first point. Also the
Yeah, Volskaya does a lot of comps you can run.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that actually reminds me, I'm going to deviate just a smidgen of a second from these questions. But have you guys had a chance to play Paris? And what do you think we might be seeing once that goes
map.
competitive? Yes, the map, not.
I've
the
famous
I've
now.
not played
It's
it.
Paris.
I've not played it once. Not played it once.
No,
Never even
I
played
don't
it.
think I've even loaded into the map.
no.
So,
We have had me, Apple, and a couple of our players have had a run around Paris and theorized, but we've never actually played it as a team.
Wow.
I can tell you looking at Paris and seeing a lot of not necessarily like pro scrims, but like high level scrims when it was first on the PTR, and something that a lot that we were all theorizing around at the time was how much of pun intended, how much of a hybrid Paris is between Hanamura and Volskaya Industries.
Yeah.
Because you have such a long walk from defense going towards point A that you lose that first fight. Like there's no hope whatsoever. Not like in any assault map that you ever had a hope of a dream. Once you lose half of your team on point A, that's pretty much just the attackers anyway. But what I meant by that too, kind of like what JKLo was just previously saying for Volskaya, is that point A offers a lot of versatility for compositions. There's a lot of there's only a handful of flanks that you can play around where a tracer might be prevalent, but most importantly, it makes snipers surely enabled. Hanzo, Ash, Widowmaker especially sees all the way down the main choke sightline from the point. I mean, there's at least 3 different peaks that Widowmaker can take on Paris point A that makes it very devastating. I'd see it being very defenders heavy, just like all of our wonderful.
I think the first thing I thought of when I saw Paris A was it's just Anubis. The little bit of high ground in front of the point is much bigger, and you don't have the raised platform in the back that you have on Anubis. But other than that, the first point is Anubis. Same choke you've got to push through right in front of a little high ground point way behind it. Same sniper sight lines, a little bit less high ground, but same flank routes as well. It's Anubis.
I completely forgot Anubis existed until you just talked about it now. It's been so long since I played that map.
Pro players, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. Back to the questions, and this next one is for ecLipse. How was it playing in the World Cup? Are there any similarities to Contenders/Contenders Trials? And what advice do you have for aspiring pros, seeing as you're fairly new to the pro scene yourself?
Playing World Cup was actually amazing. It's like the first real uh, big tournament you play. I mean, for me at least, and it's just maybe that's why I didn't like panic or stuff like in trials and playoffs on stream because
Mm.
I'm kind of used to it now. But going into the pro scene, having tips, I don't know. It's the pro scene in EU. I'm just gonna say it. It's pretty much dead. Like if you didn't make it into
Hot take.
contenders, uh, you're pretty much screwed for the next 6 months, and it's a lot of time for people. You can't just play this game full time with nothing like at the horizon. And right now, it's looking dire. I don't have any tips to be honest. I mean I'm just honest. I don't know.
Biggest tip is to go to a different game for the
Yeah,
next six
I
months.
probably will, but
Yikes,
Pro NA.
guys.
I mean, there's
Or,
not really.
or I mean,
There's
or you just grind out for the next 6 months and make sure you
I mean,
get.
if you really have the time to
pros.
dedicate that, then my best tip is to just get a 6-man team, train for a crazy 6 months, so you're definitely in Contenders Trials. Then just roll Contenders Trials, then you're in Contenders. But other than that, there's really nothing else to do.
Well, I mean, I think the best thing for EU scene right now is at least hopefully with the next open division coming up, they'll actually allow more teams to qualify for
Yeah,
trials, and then from trials, then it's like, I mean, if there's
if
a
that
lot more
happens,
opportunity, then the scene won't be much of a corpse as it is now. But uh, hopefully, it will look up for people in EU.
yeah,
I think looking from the outside in to you all as a caster and an analyst, even Vowels is in here as well. Like you can't, and this is more than just a saying at this point. The grind doesn't stop. It never will. And when you aspire and you really want something that bad, I mean, ever since taking just use an example, ecLipse, like from seeing you from from the Overwatch World Cup group stage all the way to where you are now, I don't think like the grind ever got any halt whatsoever throughout where you are right now too. I mean, even through multiple teams into Novus and now on second generation, you're never stopping. Same thing for Vals too. That LFT post went out after coming through from casting, and then he got picked up by Square One now. So I mean, like you always aspire and drive to do something too. And hey, I'll go all three. I mean, Jklol too. I mean, you saw it even from Open Division all the way towards Shoes Bunny Crew in trials. I mean, like the grind doesn't stop. You're always
Yeah.
going to continue to play the game, whether or not you have fun playing competitive mode or not. You just got to keep grinding, man.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's the point in grinding if there's nothing to grind to? Is the point here?
yeah. I mean,
Sure.
for me, there was actually something to grind for, like OD and then eventually Contenders Trials. But right now there isn't. So I can't really give any tips for people because there's nothing to grind for. It's only OD, and that's so long away that you can't commit just 6 months of your.
Yeah.
If you like, I mean, for me it would be fine because I'm in school, but a lot of people don't have that fortune, and it's just in a bad state right now. So,
Well, if I'm not wrong, the spots that are confirmed for academy teams will no longer be like held hard and fast
Yeah.
for the next season, so they will be subject to relegation. So hopefully in the next season it will pick up a little bit, but as you guys say, for the next 6 months I think it is a little bit disheartening for players that are aiming for that pro spot, because there isn't too much opportunity for the next
yeah.
little while.
I think the best thing would be to for Paris Eternal and now to do really good, because if they do pretty well, then Blizzard will maybe look more at EU and looking to add more, maybe like another league. So there's like in NA, there's like two different contenders leagues. Just
Yeah.
allow the talent to grow more, because there's a lot of talent in the EU. As you can see, as hopefully we'll see from Paris now. So
For me, I think it doesn't even really have to be like a lot of league. It's just tournaments where people get to show
yeah,
show off, and so you maybe get picked up.
like the Jane tournament. The Jane tournament
Yeah,
is really
exactly.
really good
Jane's doing a great
for
job at it.
exposure.
But I think for me personally, there's two little tournaments in EU to show off what you are actually capable of.
I miss the Go for Overwatch tournaments.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
man. Back in day. All right, let's move on to the next question. And this one comes from Panda, and it's for ecLipse and Jklol. How big is the difference going from the tier 3 scene to tier 2? And how much have you learned from your experienced players and coaches? Was there anything that blew your mind when you found out? And I feel like he's hinting at something.
You want to start, JK?
Yeah, I guess. We're going from tier 3 to tier 2 as a main tank. It's really different. I'm not sure how I managed to adapt so fast to it, but in tier 3 main tank in goats, literally you just hold down mouse 1 W, you win. Like that's that easy. But when you get into tier 2, you have to be so good at shield management. Like I think the best main tank I played against for developing my own play was against Chubbs, because Chubbs is a very shield heavy, very defensive Ryan. A lot of people in Twitch chat that talk bad about him, but I think he was one of the best main tanks. You have to play around him and his style really well with his shield. Like I didn't know how to shield very well until I played against him a few times in scrims, and I just watching him play sort of taught me how to play Ryan. Also along with Panda and Panda Space and Recent giving me tips and coaching on how to play uh, a much high level Ryan. But yeah, the jump from tier 3 to tier 2 for main tank at least is really big. There's quite a big gap between tier 3 and tier 2 main tanks, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think it's more the teammates, like the dedication. You really feel that, yeah, these people are on the same page as you. They really want to succeed, and I just feel like in tier 3, it's just, yeah, you play, you don't make it, and yeah, nobody really cares. So when you're actually in tier 2, people put emotions into the game. They dedicate time, and they actually care about winning. And it's just the seriousness and dedication of my teammates and us that really surprised me. I mean, especially because, as I said earlier, a lot of those people were already in tier 2 before that, and you could tell the dedication of Molf and Obling, and also the Samsung boys, and Kara, who was in Contenders as well. So for me, it's more the teammates rather than me personally performing.
Yeah, definitely. There's like a level of experience the players like Miles and Barbecue brought to my play, like watching them and how experienced they were compared to my teammates in All Planned, which were quite inexperienced with tier 2.
Yeah.
There was such a big difference between just keeping a cool head and having that experience in those clutch moments, like in our close games, like against OMG and against NOS as well. Like just being able to perform at with such high stakes instead of letting go of your cool like we did in All Planned a few times. There's such a big difference, tier 3 and tier 2 with that as well.
Yeah, also the coaches for us. I think the coaches, the amount of work and scouting, VOD reviews our coaches did for us, Gizmo and Mentality. It's insane. Just the amount of just pure scouting, just preparing us. We knew exactly what the enemies were gonna play, and there was never like a surprise moment where we're like, oh, we didn't talk about this, or I didn't know they played this here. It's just the preparation. You feel really confident going into the game when you have coaches supporting you in the way that we got supported.
All right. Next question is basically for Vowels and Panda, because it applies. How has the transition from being a caster / analyst to helping coaching been? I know, Panda, you touched on it a little bit at the start of the show, but if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that, especially from Vowels, who obviously has taken it you're still casting, but it's a little bit more full time, I believe, obviously now that you're going into Contenders.
I think, well, because casting is more dominant in my life over coaching, so kind of like, I guess you get the tale of two answers between me and Valis here. Helping out with coaching and analysis for a team, I'm not gonna lie, is like 40% selfish mentality, because I love living vicariously through the players, not being a player myself, not being as mechanically gifted, not necessarily having the time to grind for said mechanics as well. Above all, it just feels really good to be a part of something, a bigger to the smaller fish in a bigger pack is something that really comes to mind for me. And I think just the overall satisfaction of seeing a team get shaky after even like a scrim and then be triumphant through Overwatch Open Division really solidified that feeling for me. That it's just that is something that's always been close to me as a caster and now as a coach too. Is like I just like helping individuals out to succeed for their better. And because Overwatch is a team game, helping those individuals out progress as a team felt even better. And that's something that I've always strived for. So 40% selfish mentality of wanting to live vicariously through my team, and then 60% just to see them succeed.
All right. We do have a couple of meme questions here, but I think they could be fun. So here's a question for ecLipse. Are you jealous of Jklol now being on a team with your favorite Danes?
I am very jealous. I really liked Overwatch and Wolf, and I would have loved to play with them, but sadly we didn't make it into Contenders and we got split. So I'm very jealous of you, JK. Would be a shame if something happened to you.
And you had to take the main tank spot in Shoes
Yeah.
Yikes! I would actually like to see ecLipse main tank. That'd be great.
I'm so garbage at main tank. So garbage.
Rude.
Honesty is key here.
All right, next meme question is for Jklol. I don't know if it's actually a meme, but I think it's funny. Ask Jklol how he coached a console player into getting straight into Contenders so quickly with Slur.
I mean, I didn't really coach him. I know a lot of people point out his Moira play in trials and in playoffs as well. But one of our first coaches in our very old team, Mr. Pig, who on Marv, he actually taught him how to play Moira, how to play Mercy, which are some of his signature heroes. Of course, his Zen is his signature. But I think with Zen, it was just I don't know how he has such a good natural aim. But his aim is pretty insane on Zen. I mean, my aim is terrible, but I mean, I'm a main tank player, so.
Here's a question from our social media guy, also ecLipse. How are you looking forward to playing either with pocketing Chrono or Burger? And how will you deal with Bipop's mom cutting out his internet after 11 p.m.?
I didn't get to see that yet, but I'm excited to play with Boger and Chronodollar because they have really different playstyles, and it's kind of fun playing with them. So yeah.
Sorry, is that internet thing legit?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm new to the team. I'm new to the boys. I don't know. I don't get the insiders yet.
Only time will tell.
You need to let us know when you find out.
I will do.
Because that's amazing. Okay, finally, last little meme question. And it was for Panda and Vowels. Who is your favorite Broadcast.gg social media person / caster?
Vowels, please. I'm gonna follow up on this answer so I can answer respectfully.
Who I don't. It said social media person / caster. Are you trying to play to someone who does both? Can't think of anyone who does
There's
both.
like only like two. Like it's almost like Scythe is trying to make me just say him, and it's like, come on, bro. I'm just gonna sit here and I'm just gonna say Kick Tripod. He's never casted a day in his life, and by God, is he? I love that man's voice.
I would like. Oh boy, Kick Tripod casting would be certainly something.
give him like one whiskey and like just watch him just go hamburgers on the cast, dude. It'd be great. It'd be awesome.
Get wrecked, sci-fi.
Yeah, I see it, sci-fi. Yeah, that's right. Got chat open, getting rolled by my words.
All right, guys. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the podcast. I don't know if you guys had questions for each other. The guests, if you wanted to ask each other anything, we've got like 5 minutes.
What's the meaning of life, Vals?
Oh, the grind.
Discord to Ryan.
You were supposed to say 42.
Oh. The grind.
Big
Right.
yikes.
Yeah, probably the grind.
All right. So the meaning of life is this podcast. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks,
No.
guys. And tell your friends.
There was no hesitation. He was just like the grind, and the coach just like, yeah, no, he's right. He's right.
He's right.
I mean, we're all European. We know how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're all European. Yeah, K Koner, brother. Yeah, we're all European. Yeah.
The three people who said the grind are all European.
Woo y'all!
All right, guys. I'm gonna say thank you to each of you for joining me today. This very late episode. Man, scheduling has been a mission, but I'm really glad we finally got around to it. Vowels, I know you were off in the distance searching for those consonants Panda told us about. So thank you for making it for the end of our show here. Thank you to the players. I wish you guys the best of luck in Contenders. Once again, guys, !grind will give you a link to our Discord. Please come join us. You will find out before anybody else who the guests are, and you are able to submit your questions before the show for the Q&A segment that we do have at the end of each show. So please come through and join us. Once again, thank you guys to our guests. You guys make this all possible, and we'll see you guys in the next episode, hopefully in 2 weeks, schedules allowing. See you guys in the next one.